My name is Kathryn Camron. Most people call me Kay. I'm retired medical technologist from Holzer Hospital.
And what were you doing when the bridge collapsed?
I had just gone to work. I worked the evening shift and I went to work at 5 o'clock. So I had just gotten there.
How did you find out that?
We heard the sirens and saw the emergency vehicles rushing up 2nd Avenue. And one of the nurses came running across the back hall, and I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "The bridge has fallen."
And at this time, Holzer Hospital was not out on 160.
No, it was on 2nd Avenue here in Gallipolis.
Right.
And how many survivors did you have?
I think one man came in with a broken leg. There were no survivors.
What was the preparations that the hospital made?
Well, most of the staff had gone home at 5 o'clock, and as soon as they heard the news, I think probably all, or at least most of them, came back in thinking that there must be something they would be able to do. There in the laboratory, we checked to see how much O-negative blood we had available. We thawed some frozen plasma that could be given instead of blood, and then we waited. The kitchen people made up trays of sandwiches, but there was nothing else to do.
So you only had one person show up?
I believe we had one come in, and I think that was all. I believe some of them maybe were taken to Pleasant Valley Hospital in Point Pleasant, but I'm not sure about that.
Depending on which side of the bridge.
Yes,
that they were
you
on.
know.
And you said earlier about a man who made a comment about how there's probably not going to be anybody coming in.
One of our pediatricians who had come back in commented that the temperature of the water was about 35 degrees, and I don't know how he knew that, but he did. And he said, you know, the human body can only live in water that cold for about 15 minutes.
Did you talk to anybody else afterwards or go down to the site?
No, I didn't go down the site. I was on call at the hospital all night, and I'm sure the next few days, of course there was, you know, we knew there was so much traffic in that area that I don't believe that we tried to go to see it. I saw it sometime within the next week or so, but not immediately. We just were, I think everyone was so stunned. You just could not believe that something like this had happened. When this nurse first told me that the bridge had fallen, I assumed she meant a little bridge out in the county over a little creek or something. You know, I couldn't, the idea that the Silver Bridge had fallen was just too much to comprehend.
It had a pretty good reputation.
Well, you know, yeah, who ever heard of a bridge over a major river falling? I'd never heard of anything like that.
Did you know anybody that went down that survived or did not survive?
I knew at least one man who did not survive, yeah. A man named Bus Lee. He was not a close friend. I knew his brother quite well because his brother worked at the hospital.
What were the preparations after it fell, as far as how people were getting around, or how your life had changed maybe since it had fell?
Well, of course, there was the question of how people got back and forth between Gallipolis and Point Pleasant. I don't remember how long it was before they began the ferry service, but until that happened, you know, to get to West Virginia, we had to go to Pomeroy and cross. And fortunately, about my only need to go to Point Pleasant was when I went to the dentist, because my dentist was over there. So I don't think I ever rode the ferry. Now, we had nurses at the hospital who lived in Point Pleasant, and they had to ride the ferry, you know, in the morning when they came to work and evening when they went home. And it was very slow, and I remember one of my friends did a lot of knitting, and I don't know how many sweaters she knit that winter while she was sitting there waiting for the ferry. But it was very slow. I think they only had one ferry boat, so they couldn't take very many cars at a time, and there were a lot of people who were traveling back and forth.
Do you remember anything about the Mothman rumors, and do you believe
Oh,
them?
there were always crazy rumors about the Mothman, and that was just sort of ridiculous. When my husband and I were dating, that was when the Mothman supposedly first appeared. I certainly never saw it, and I don't know anyone else that did, but of course after that, you know, it's sort of like the curse of Cornstalk, you know. Whenever anything bad happened, it was either the curse of Cornstalk or it was the Mothman.
Had people been talking about that before the bridge had fallen?
No, not since, you know, the original sightings of the Mothman, and I don't remember when. That must have been about 1954, because that's when we were married.
Any other stories you would like to share, any accounts?
I was just thinking, this Christmas season, of course, at that time, people were decorated and were getting ready for Christmas like they are now. And I remember the one family here in Gallipolis who had a son on the bridge. The story was that the father had just walked in the house, picked up their Christmas tree and took it out and threw it in the backyard because he couldn't think of celebrating Christmas. It's still a little bit emotional.
Anything else you got?
I don't think so. As I say, I did not know very many people on the bridge personally, but that was, I think that event sort of set the tone for that whole winter in Gallipolis, you know. The search for the bodies and the two that were not found for so long. It was just always in the back of our minds, I think, that the bridge had gone down. And it was a long time before I could go over a bridge and not think about it. And I still think about it occasionally when I cross a bridge.